In case you didn't know, Enfield has opened a public registration for their next technical test starting January 12 next year. Everyone can sign up by filling a short survey about your experience with various games and your PC specs. Just like before, all playtesters are allowed to record and share the gameplay. This time around, the UI will be in English. The survey registration will be closed on December 24th. As a game developer, I was surprised that the second test comes this soon. 2 months is not a long time in game development, especially big-budget games like Enfield. I can assume that they must have achieved their objective in the previous tests and managed to make necessary changes within 2 months. Or they just want to get more feedback from the international audience since the last test was only for Chinese players. While that means we won't have much to discuss about Enfield until next year, I think we can take a glimpse on what Enfield is supposed to be from the questions asked in this survey. The biggest question that I always have from the start is, who is Enfield made for, and what is it supposed to be when it's finished? And I think I found the answer. Well, sort of. I already made 2 videos analyzing the previous technical tests and sharing my concerns and skepticism about Enfield. If you're interested, please go ahead and watch them right here. But in summary, I was not sure who the target audience for this game is. Their website said it is a 3D RPG with strategic elements, clearly trying to appeal to their existing Arknights players. But how much of that strategic element will be in Enfield? Because the combat seems to be pretty mindless, exploration seems to be barebone, and the base building seems to be quite straightforward. At the same time, the combat in the previous test is not exciting enough to appeal to a mass audience. They're trying to play both ways, but ended up making the worst of both. That's why analyzing the questions asked in the survey might give us more information about their vision. They are looking for feedback from players that played similar games. So the games listed here will tell us what games inspire the development of Enfield, and the games not listed here will tell us what directions they avoid. Right off the bat, we got their direct rivals in open-world gacha RPGs and also some single-player AAA titles included in the list. It's quite interesting that they included Dark Souls, which is more Metroidvania than open world with a notoriously challenging combat system. And Death Stranding? That explains why Enfield's game world feels so empty. Then we have some big RPG series like Xenoblade, Tales, and Final Fantasy. All of these games vary wildly in their combat system, though in terms of the combat flow, I think Xenoblade and Tales of Arise are the closest ones to Enfield. Next, we got some top-down action RPGs, which is similar to Enfield in terms of their methodical combat pacing, like highlighted enemy attacks, dodging, and managing ability cooldowns. The strategy in these games is more in your character gears and talents. If Enfield wants to be a Diablo-like, I think it'll be fun, but it will also be very grindy. Then we also get some management games, which is expected for the base building part of the game. And it's also not a surprise to see a lot of sandbox games which emphasize the freedom to build or make anything. Now, here comes some weird games into the list that I cannot fully explain why it's there. You may have noticed that they have put some weird turn-based gacha games into this list for some reason. Maybe they are inspired by its progression system instead? I'm not really sure. Next, there are also some spectacle third-person combat games, which excels in making you feel strong by giving a lot of quick and flashy attacks, while emphasizing mastery in chaining combos and timing dodges. The only problem is, Enfield's combat is far slower because of its ability cooldown. Enfield doesn't even have a dodge button in the last test, so I wonder if Hypergriff wants Enfield's combat to be a lot faster in the future. If that's the case, it will certainly explain why they also included MMORPGs in here. Maybe they are looking to add a multiplayer feature, maybe like a co-op raid. I think Enfield can work in co-op mode, but it will be a very boring experience because all characters in the party can only walk around and use one ability. They will need to make more features to make it not boring. But if they are looking at MMO's questing design, that'll be a lot more interesting. Imagine if we can ally with different factions in the game, and even a possible faction PvP combat. Now let's talk about the games they don't put in this list. For a game marketed as strategic, it's quite interesting that they didn't list any BioWare games, like Mass Effect or Dragon Age Inquisition, which has a similar combat loop. Every character in the party has their own sets of abilities, and you require some thinking in every combat encounter. Or Girls Frontline, which is basically XCOM with anime girls. I would argue that this is a strategy game that almost all Arknights players want Endfield to be. Everything in OG Arknights translates very well into Girls Frontline mechanic. You have the snipers to deal damage from afar, shielder to taunt enemies, guards to go melee and deal damage, and supporter to buff allies or debuff enemies. It's such a clear choice for a company specializing in making a strategy game. But they obviously didn't do that, opting to make an action game instead. So, from the list of games here, Endfield is looking for players interested in the sandbox base building and any open-world RPGs with a combat system that is more methodical than just spamming abilities. But they didn't want it to be too strategic, which is weird. They are also interested in adapting questing design from various RPGs, including MMOs, into their game world. Aside from the list of games, there are also some hardware survey requirements. It is interesting that there is no reduction in specs from the first test, though they seem to insist that those specs will eventually go down with further game optimization, which is reasonable. In game development, you don't want to optimize too early. But contrary to popular belief, I think the spec is not going to go down any further for PC. The minimum spec for Endfield is already very close to the most popular spec on the Steam PC hardware survey. So I guess if you want to play Endfield on PC, you better start saving up for that overdue PC upgrade. Or maybe don't. Endfield has confirmed that it will be playable on PS5, and based on this survey, they are also targeting to release on mobile, Xbox, and Switch. That last one is going to be a challenge for the development team. There is a reason why Genshin is still not available on Switch to this day, even though they promised it almost 4 years ago. And it's also quite weird that they didn't put Steam Deck into this list. Maybe because they don't want their game to run on any Linux operating system. But ROG Ally is also not in that list, even though it runs on Windows. So yeah, even with this survey, Endfield's overall design direction seems yet to be determined. The foundation of the game itself still feels very shaky. Of course, we don't know how many tests they are going to make before the launch itself, so they still have time to lock in on getting the players what they want. They are very careful in naming it technical tests and not alpha or beta tests. I have signed up for the test myself, so we'll see if they would like to have me in it. I really want to help them get Endfield firmly on its feet, so that's why I want to feel this game for myself so I can give some helpful feedback based on my experience in designing games. In case you cannot tell, I really want Endfield to be great and not dead on arrival. If you do sign up for the technical test, please be careful if you find someone trying to sell their access account for Endfield. Don't buy them. The website clearly said that doing so will revoke your access to the test itself. Also, please be careful when opening emails that claim to be from Hypergriff. Always check their email address first, and make sure it comes from Hypergriff or Griffline. But let me know what you guys think about this video. Did I miss something in the survey? Is Endfield going to be alright? While you're here, why not check out my previous analysis video on Enfield's demo and the gameplay from the first technical test. I think a lot of people shared some of my concerns there, so let me know if you agree or disagree in that video. Subscribe if you'd like to see more of this analysis, and with that, I think I'll see you guys later on Talos 2. Goodbye.